I don't even know where to start with this. It feels like yesterday, but also like a lifetime ago. My wife, let's call her Emily, had this surgery. Nothing life-threatening, but she said she needed to stay overnight with her mom afterward. Easy enough, right? We've been through a lot together. My rough patch with depression, money struggles that nearly broke us, even losing a baby. I thought we were solid. So when she called and said her mom was doing okay but she was extra tired and would stay the night, I didn't blink. I just told her to get some rest, but her voice sounded off. It was flat, almost hollow, and there was this faint echo like she was speaking from a big, empty room, not a hospital ward. When I asked if I could speak to her mom just for a quick hello, she shut me down fast, real fast, said her mom was sleeping, that it was late. It wasn't even 7 p.m. That's when a weird little knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't suspicion, not exactly. More like a cold dread, a premonition. Later that night, just before I was about to head to bed, I did something I rarely do. We set up Find My iPhone years ago just for safety, you know. If one of us ever got stranded or something. I opened the app, expecting to see her iPhone pinging from her mom's house, 2 towns over. But her little blue dot wasn't there. It was in a town I didn't even recognize, closer to an outer suburb, near a specific hotel I vaguely knew existed. A Comfort Inn. My fingers hovered over the screen. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, my senses screaming that something essential, something fundamental had just snapped. Then I saw her car. Or rather, I saw a car. It was parked in the lot. Emily's car. And next to it, my brother's truck. The same truck he'd driven since college. The same brother who'd pulled me back from the brink 6 years ago when I tried to end it all. The knot in my stomach tightened, twisting into a Gordian knot of pure terror. I grabbed my keys, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped them. My heart was pounding a drumbeat against my ribs as I pulled into the dimly lit parking lot of the Comfort Inn. It was late, quiet, and the only light came from the buzzing neon sign and the pale glow of the room numbers. I parked a little ways down, shut off the engine, and just sat there for a minute. The air felt thick, heavy, like before a storm. Was I about to walk in on something? Was Emily in trouble? I convinced myself it was a mistake. Maybe she'd met a friend. Maybe her mom had a complication and they'd moved hospitals. My mind scrambled for any explanation that wasn't the one currently churning in my gut. But the presence of my brother's truck, right next to hers, was a flashing red siren. I got out of the car, the gravel crunching loudly under my feet. Each step felt like wading through concrete. I kept my eyes fixed on the hotel rooms, looking for the number I'd seen on the app, 214. The windows were dark, most of them. A few had TVs casting faint blue light. I reached the door to 214. I took a deep breath, trying to rein in the hysteria. I raised my hand, then hesitated. What was I going to say? What if I was completely wrong? What if this was all a terrible misunderstanding? But all those rational thoughts dissolved when I heard hushed voices from inside. A man's deep rumble and Emily's higher pitch. I knocked. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was firm, a demand for an answer. The voices inside stopped. The silence that followed was even more deafening. Then the sound of footsteps. My breath caught in my throat. The door opened, and it was my brother, Josh. He wasn't wearing a shirt. His hair was a mess, and he looked completely stunned, breathless, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. Then Emily appeared behind him. She was wrapped in a fluffy white hotel towel, her hair damp and clinging to her shoulders. Her face was flushed, her cheeks bright red. She looked guilty. She looked something I'd never seen before. "What are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Josh, still wordless, just ran a hand through his already rumpled hair, avoiding my gaze entirely. My entire chest seized up, a sickening, crushing implosion of everything I thought was real. The air in the hallway suddenly reeked of cheap body lotion and something else, something sterile and intimate. I glanced past my brother into the room. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled. And on the bedside table, glinting innocently in the dim light, was a condom wrapper. But the truth, the full, gut-wrenching truth, hadn't even hit me yet. My mind was a fog. I remember standing there, unable to move, unable to speak. The unspoken accusation hanging in the air between me, Emily, and Josh was suffocating. Eventually, I think Josh mumbled something about needing to get dressed, and Emily practically pushed him back into the room, her eyes darting between us like a trapped animal. I didn't follow, I couldn't. I just turned and walked away back to my car, every fiber of my being screaming in protest. Getting home was a blur. I don't remember driving, just the numb, automatic movements. The house felt unnervingly quiet. Emily eventually came home hours later, acting like nothing had happened, offering vague apologies for being so tired and needing rest. I couldn't even look at her. The image of Josh shirtless, Emily in a towel, the condom wrapper, it was burned into my retinas. I went to bed, but sleep was impossible. The next day was worse. The confusion and disbelief warred with a growing, icy certainty. I felt hollowed out. I needed to know. I needed concrete proof, something to explain away the impossibility of it all. I found myself drawn to Emily's private iPad, the one she rarely let me touch, kept securely logged into her messages. A terrible impulse, I know, but I couldn't stop myself. My fingers trembled as I opened her chat logs. I scrolled, my stomach churning with every word, every picture. Then I found it. A video. It was in the same hotel room. Emily was on her knees, facing the edge of the bed where Josh was sitting. Her hair was wet, just like I'd seen it. He reached out, grabbed a strand of her hair, and she looked up, a strange little smile on her face. As I watched, mesmerized and horrified, the video progressed. It reached its climax. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I watched him discharge into her mouth. She opened wide, receiving him, and then, as the fluid dripped, she giggled. He whispered something to her, calling her his little addiction. My world tilted on its axis. This wasn't just a mistake. This was an ongoing thing. Then I saw the date stamp on the video. It was last year. During our anniversary trip, we were supposed to be celebrating us. While I was planning romantic dinners and thoughtful gifts, she was sharing intimate moments like this with my brother. The fact that this was captured months ago, not just a spur-of-the-moment lapse, obliterated any chance of forgiveness. I had seen snippets of their betrayal, but this video confirmed the depth and the duration of their deceit. It was a cold, hard fact, undeniable and soul-crushing. After seeing that video, the dam of disbelief finally broke. It wasn't just a one-off mistake or a recent lapse in judgment. This had been going on for a long, long time. The pieces started clicking into place, forming a horrific mosaic of deception. I began replaying every conversation, every accusation, every unexplained absence in my mind. Her volunteer trips to help out friends in other towns, his late coaching nights that always seemed to coincide with her absences, their lingering glances at family gatherings that I'd always dismissed as sibling affection. I remembered the smug smirk Josh gave me at Thanksgiving when he proudly announced he was spending more quality time with family. At the time, I just felt a pang of guilt for not being around enough. Now it felt loaded, a taunt. I recalled other instances, too. Times I'd seen Emily glued to her phone, the screen locked tight, a quick, dismissive brush-off that it was just work. I'd let it go. I'd wanted to let it go. Driven by a desperate need for evidence, for some concrete understanding, I accessed our joint credit card statements. I pored over them with a fine-tooth comb, my eyes stinging from the strain and the tears. And there they were. A litany of charges that painted a damning picture. Hotel bills in towns miles away, Uber rides that ended at nondescript addresses, late-night restaurant charges in cities she claimed to be nowhere near. Every entry was a stab wound. This wasn't new. This had been happening for over 2 years. 2 years of Emily looking me in the eye, telling me she loved me, while secretly sharing herself with my brother. 2 years where I'd confided in Josh about feeling distant from Emily, pouring my heart out to him about our marital struggles, about how I worried she was falling out of love with me. And all the while, he was the reason she felt distant. He was the one she was with. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. My wife, my best friend, the woman I thought was my everything, had been systematically lying to me, betraying me with the one person I trusted implicitly apart from her. The man who had saved my life. The irony was a cruel, bitter joke. I felt like a complete fool, blind to the obvious, manipulated at every turn. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a deep-seated violation, a complete dismantling of my reality by the two people I held dearest. The digital breadcrumbs continued to pile up, each one a fresh assault on my already shattered composure. I dug deeper into Emily's messages, finding threads that made my skin crawl with their casual cruelty. One message, sent directly to Josh, laid bare her chilling perspective. I love how he still thinks we're working on things. It makes it so much hotter to know you're in me after I fake counseling with him. The thought of her sitting across from me, pretending to engage in therapy sessions with me, all while having this twisted fantasy about deceiving me with my brother, made me nauseous. Another message was accompanied by a photo. It showed Emily in a hotel bathroom, her makeup smudged, her eyes looking both exhausted and exhilarated. The caption read, "You ruin me every time and I love it. Ruin me." The word echoed in my head. She was talking about him, but it felt like she was talking about me too, because he was ruining me. He was ruining my marriage, my family, my entire sense of self. But the messages that truly broke me were the ones where she seemed to revel in the comparison between us. She said her favorite part was how she felt alive with him in ways I never gave her. I read aloud from my phone, my voice cracking. She said her favorite part was how she felt alive with him in ways I never gave her. The implication was clear. I was insufficient. I was lacking. I couldn't provide her with the passion, the excitement, the sheer aliveness she craved. Then I saw the date on that particular message exchange. My stomach dropped. I remembered that day vividly. I had been admitted to a psychiatric clinic, struggling with another wave of crippling depression. Emily had visited me, her face a mask of concern, telling me she was dedicating herself to her healing journey while I was away. She held my hand, whispered reassurances. She painted a picture of herself as a supportive, devoted wife, weathering storms alongside me. But this message told a different story. While I was battling my demons, lost in the darkness, she was finding her aliveness with my brother. She was finding it thrilling to be with him, knowing I was at my lowest, confined to a hospital. The betrayal wasn't just sexual, it was a calculated exploitation of my vulnerability. She used my pain as an aphrodisiac for her illicit affair. The thought of her giggling with Josh about how she was healing, while I was fighting for my sanity, was a profound and sickening twist of the knife. The exchange of messages between Emily and Josh wasn't just about their secret rendezvous. It was a chilling chronicle of their calculated betrayal, and it revealed a depth of cruelty I hadn't imagined possible. Josh's texts weren't filled with the flushed, excited ramblings of a man caught in a passionate affair. Instead, they were cold, precise, and laced with a dark humor that made my blood run cold. He'd send Emily memes that mocked wives who need better, and she'd respond with graphic details about our bedroom, painting a picture of my supposed inadequacy. It wasn't enough for them to just physically betray me. They had to psychologically dismantle me too. Josh had access to my deepest insecurities, the raw wounds I'd confided in him years ago when he talked me down from a ledge. He knew every fear, every doubt, every fragile part of my psyche, and he used that knowledge as a weapon. One message from him read, "He's too weak to leave you, but I'm strong enough to break you in." The sheer malice in that statement was staggering. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was orchestrating a plan to systematically destroy me. He was using Emily, and she was complicit. She was feeding him information, actively participating in his scheme to undermine me. I started to wonder, with a growing sense of dread, if this was all part of his plan from the beginning. Had he been grooming Emily, or perhaps even me, for this moment years ago? Was him saving me a calculated move to gain my ultimate trust, to ensure he always had a piece of my life, a foothold from which to eventually dismantle it? The thought of him, the man I considered family, the man who'd saved my life, orchestrating my downfall while sleeping with my wife, was almost too much to bear. It wasn't just about sex anymore. It was about power, about control, about a twisted form of revenge I couldn't even begin to comprehend. He wasn't just betraying me. He was mocking me through her, using her as an extension of himself, a tool to inflict maximum damage. I realized with sickening clarity that this wasn't spontaneous lust. This was a long game, and I had been the unsuspecting pawn. The phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice, usually so warm and comforting, sounded strained. She was calling to check in, as she always did. But the way she asked about Emily, the hesitant questions, my gut instinct kicked in again. I'd been so consumed by the raw information from the messages and texts that I hadn't considered anyone else might know. "How's Emily doing after her surgery?" she'd asked, and I, without thinking, launched into the litany of discoveries. "Mom," I started, my voice trembling, "Emily, she hasn't been staying with you. She's been with Josh. They've been having an affair for years." The words spilled out, a torrent of a confession that I'd been holding inside. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. It stretched, and I could feel her holding her breath. Then finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh, honey," she sighed, and the sound was filled with a profound sadness. "I didn't think you'd find out this way." Everything inside me shattered. Not just the belief in my wife or my brother, but the belief that my own mother had known and said nothing. She confirmed it. They had gotten close at a family reunion a few years back. She said she'd tried to intervene, to talk sense into them. She warned them, begged them to stop, but they hadn't listened. "Why didn't you tell me?" I choked out, the question laced with a desperate plea for an explanation. Her voice cracked. I didn't tell you because you were recovering from another mental health episode, darling. You were so fragile. I didn't think you could handle it. I thought it would break you." She was right. It was breaking me. But now, knowing she knew and kept it from me, it was a different kind of shard piercing my heart. Maybe I couldn't have handled it then. But now I didn't want to handle anything. The weight of their deception and my mother's complicity was crushing me. After my mom's confession, a cold, hard resolve settled over me. I had to go back to that hotel. I had to see it myself, to touch the remnants of their betrayal. Emily and Josh had clearly checked out by then, their cars gone. But I remembered the room number, 214. I found a way in, a discreet knock on the housekeeping card, a whispered request, a conveniently timed distraction. The room was empty, stripped of its temporary occupants, but still thick with their presence. The scent of their interwoven lives lingered in the air, a cloying mix of Emily's perfume and Josh's cologne. It was a shrine to their sins, and I was the unwilling pilgrim. I walked around slowly, my eyes scanning every surface, every corner. On the desk, an open envelope. Inside, printed photos. Not blurry phone snaps, but clear, sharp images. They were more explicit than anything I'd seen yet. Emily, sprawled on the bed, not just looking at herself, but actively engaged, calling his name with a husky whisper. Her moans seemed to echo in the sterile quiet of the room. The trash can held more than just discarded toiletries, used condoms, their wrappers, and nestled amongst them a bottle of lubricant. My blood ran colder. That was the same brand Josh had gifted me for my bachelor party, a gag gift meant to poke fun at my supposed inexperience. The thought of him using it with my wife in this room twisted my stomach into knots. Then I saw the note. On the bedside table, tucked beneath a crumpled tissue, it was written on hotel stationery, the handwriting angular and hurried. "See you soon, my real man." It wasn't signed with a name, but the implication was clear. It was from Emily to Josh. It wasn't even an attempt at secrecy anymore. They had become so brazen, so confident in their ability to deceive, that they barely bothered to hide their tracks. It was as if they had forgotten I was still real, still breathing, still capable of discovering their monstrous secret. They had erased me from their narrative, leaving me to stumble upon the wreckage of my life while they moved on, unburdened. The betrayal continued to unfold, layer by agonizing layer. I took Emily's iPad, her phone, anything I could get my hands on to try and piece together the full scope of their deception. Then I remembered our wedding photo, the one proudly displayed in the hallway. It was a beautiful picture, us smiling, full of hope on what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. Something felt off about it, a subtle detail I'd overlooked. Driven by an instinct I couldn't explain, I pulled the frame down from the wall. Behind the photo, taped to the back of the cardboard backing, was a second SIM card. It was tucked away, hidden, waiting to be found. My hands shook as I retrieved an old, forgotten phone from a drawer and inserted it. The gallery opened and the videos began to autoplay, one after another, each one more devastating than the last. Hotel rooms, shower scenes. Emily straddling Josh in the front seat of his truck, the gear stick a prominent feature between them. It was a raw, uncut documentary of their affair. Then, one video stopped me in my tracks. Emily was wearing our anniversary necklace. The silver chain, the pendant I'd carefully chosen, the one she'd promised to cherish. In the video, she was wearing it while she was clearly with Josh. She looked directly into the camera, a wicked smirk playing on her lips. "He's texting me right now and has no idea you're inside me," she whispered, her eyes sparkling with a dangerous excitement. The casual cruelty of that statement, the sheer enjoyment she seemed to derive from my ignorance, was a physical blow. But the horror didn't end there. In another clip, she spoke directly to the camera again, her voice laced with dark amusement. "Let's make a baby and tell him it's his." The implication sent a wave of pure revulsion through me. Was she even pregnant during our supposed miscarriage? Was that a lie too? The thought of carrying a child that wasn't mine, raised by me, while knowing its true parentage, was a horror I couldn't even begin to process. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, and I doubled over, retching violently before the video even finished. The dam of secrets finally burst. I confronted them. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I laid out screenshots, saved messages, the hotel receipts, the video evidence. I presented it all in a chaotic, tear-filled torrent that left me breathless and shaking. Emily broke down first. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed, her words a jumbled mess of apologies and excuses. "I'm broken," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to fall for him." But then, almost instantly, the tears shifted. The blame, the familiar tactic, emerged. "You were so distant," she accused, her voice hardening. "You didn't satisfy me." It was a classic deflection, turning my pain into her justification. Josh stood behind her, arms crossed, a smug expression plastered on his face. He didn't cry. He didn't break down. He just watched, a silent, unyielding wall of self-righteousness. When I finally managed to stammer out my disbelief and pain, he chimed in, his voice calm and condescending. "You need to man up," he said, as if I were a petulant child. Love is complicated. The sheer gall of it, the audacious lack of remorse, sent a wave of pure rage through me. I screamed. I couldn't hold it back. I picked up the anniversary necklace, the one from the video, the one I'd given her with so much love, and hurled it across the yard. It clattered against the fence, a pathetic, discarded symbol of our fractured past. Our neighbors, drawn by the commotion, peered from their windows and doorways. Emily, her face a mixture of fear and frustration, turned to me, her voice laced with a dangerous edge. "Are you really going to ruin both our families for a mistake?" she demanded. "A mistake?" I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Was it a mistake the 5th time?" I choked out, my voice hoarse. "The 15th. I looked from her to Josh, their faces impassive, unwilling to meet my gaze. Neither of them denied it. The silence confirmed everything. They were both complicit, and they were both unrepentant. Amongst the torrent of lies and betrayals, one revelation hit me with a force that threatened to extinguish the last embers of my spirit. Months before, Emily had suffered what we believed to be a miscarriage. We had grieved together, held each other through the pain, the devastating loss of a child we desperately wanted. I had held her as she cried, consoled her, assured her we would get through it. But among the damning messages I'd found, there it was, a thread that discussed the miscarriage in chillingly detached terms. One message from Josh Reed: he thinks he just lost a baby. He has no idea it wasn't even his. The words hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was a betrayal of our deepest shared grief. My sorrow, my pain, our shared loss, it had all been a performance for her, a manipulation designed to maintain her facade. Another message, a photograph saved from that time, showed a positive pregnancy test laid out next to Josh's toothbrush. The implication was sickeningly clear. They had conceived a child together, a child that I was meant to believe was lost in a miscarriage. Then came the follow-up text, Plan B again. Or should we let this one stay? The casual discussion of terminating a pregnancy, or worse, letting me unknowingly parent another man's child, sent a shiver of pure horror down my spine. Part of me, the part that still clung to a shred of sanity, wanted to die again. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it all was unfathomable. This wasn't just about sex. It was about rewriting my entire life, my memories, my lived experiences behind my back. She had been carrying another man's child, possibly planning to pass it off as mine, all while I held her, comforting her through a fabricated grief. The hug I'd given her, the words of comfort I'd spoken, they were hollow, contaminated by the truth. She had let me cry in her lap, whispering, "I'm sorry we couldn't make it work." Such a profound lie. The weight of their secrets had become unbearable. I couldn't let them continue their charade, their manipulation unchecked. I decided I needed to expose them, to strip away their carefully constructed illusions and lay bare their deceit for everyone to see. I created a private digital folder, a meticulously organized repository of evidence I'd painstakingly gathered. I labeled it simply, Proof. Inside, I uploaded every single screenshot, every damning video clip, every time-stamped message that exposed their affair. I then meticulously sent this folder to everyone. Her parents, my parents, our closest friends, our colleagues, every single cousin on both sides of our families. I wanted them to know the truth, the ugly, unvarnished truth. I included side-by-side comparisons of Emily's supposed alibis versus the reality of her actions. One showed her claiming to be at her mother's hospital bedside, while in the background of a video, Josh was openly kissing her thigh. I made sure their children's school received copies of the evidence, planting seeds of doubt and questions that would inevitably surface. I even printed out some of the more incriminating photos and posted them discreetly at Josh's gym, and slipped others into Emily's office mailbox. Let them face the consequences in their daily lives. The fallout was immediate and explosive. Emily called me, her voice raw with panic, but it wasn't a call born of genuine guilt. It was the sound of someone whose carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. Her tears weren't for the betrayal she'd inflicted, but for the exposure, for the loss of her pristine reputation. "You're ruining everything," she shrieked. I listened, deadened by the hollowness of her words. "Now you know what it's like to lose everything," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "While someone watches, smiling." I was talking about Josh, but I also knew she'd be facing the silent judgment of those she'd wronged, the whispers that would follow her everywhere. The legal proceedings themselves were surprisingly straightforward. The divorce papers, the division of assets, it all felt like a necessary but almost detached administrative task. The real upheaval, the emotional fallout, had already occurred when I downloaded that first incriminating message. What came after, however, was strange. Josh, after the initial shock and public humiliation, reached out. He wanted to talk. He still never apologized, not a true, heartfelt apology anyway. What he offered instead was a desperate attempt at damage control, veiled excuses, and a surprisingly brazen offer of money. "It's not what you think," he'd claim, his eyes darting away, avoiding mine. It was a desperate plea to salvage whatever remnants of his reputation he could. Emily, too, made one last attempt. A final text message sent to my new, unregistered number. "I want to find healing," she wrote. "I still love you." The words felt hollow, a desperate grasp at an anchor that had long since sunk. I sent one reply, a single video that said it all. It was one of the clips I'd found, Emily speaking candidly to Josh. "He's got nothing on you in bed, but I still pick you," she'd boasted, her voice laced with a familiar confidence. Her response to that video was silence. She knew. She knew I'd seen the ultimate proof of her calculated choice. Looking at that video now, the woman in it seemed almost dead inside, her vibrant spark, the one that drew me to her, extinguished. Perhaps she was, and perhaps she was now truly blocked. I changed my number. The house, once filled with our shared life, was now empty, and so was I, filled with a vast, echoing hollowness. But as the days turned into weeks, something unexpected began to fill that void. It wasn't the gnawing pain of betrayal or the burning rage of jealousy. There was anger, yes, a simmering undercurrent. But there was also a profound sense of peace, a quiet calm that settled over me, and that peace confused me. How could I feel this after so much devastation? The fallout for Josh was swift and brutal. His gym business, once thriving, went under. His wife, who'd apparently been aware of his infidelities with other women for years, finally left him. The whispers had become undeniable shouts, and the community he'd cultivated turned their backs. Months later, I received a message from her. Just 2 words: "Thank you." It was a hollow victory, a testament to the devastation he'd wrought on so many lives. With them gone, with their influence removed from my life, I saw the true cost of their actions. My entire family, so interconnected and interwoven, had splintered. Holidays, once a source of joy and connection, vanished into awkward silences and strained silences. The traditions we'd built together, seemingly solid foundations, had cracked and crumbled. Yet, amidst the wreckage, a strange phenomenon occurred. My panic attacks, the constant companions of my depression, began to recede. The triggers that had once sent me spiraling into anxiety seemed to lose their power. My triggers left with them, with the source of my torment removed. I was alone, yes, but for the first time in a long time, I felt safer. Josh, in his desperate attempt at reconciliation, tried to visit me once. He stood on my doorstep looking sheepish and uncomfortable. He said he wanted to fix it. I didn't even hesitate. I shut the door in his face. But before I closed it completely, I looked him in the eye and said, "You fixed me once. You pulled me back from the edge. Then you tore me apart. I don't need fixing anymore." I realized then that his validation, his presence, his brotherhood was no longer something I craved or needed. Last week, nearly a year after the initial confrontation, a small, unmarked envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name and address scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. My hands felt tight as I opened it. Inside were Polaroids, old photos, me and Josh laughing at the lake years ago, me crying on his shoulder during a particularly tough time, me looking so trusting, so oblivious. On the back of each photo, scrawled in thick black Sharpie ink, were the same chilling words: "The day I knew I could take everything from you." That's when it all clicked into place, with a stark, brutal clarity. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision for him. This wasn't a crime of passion. He hadn't just betrayed me in the present. He had been planning this, waiting for his moment for years. He had been systematically collecting ammunition, gathering the pieces of my life that he could exploit. And Emily, who I'd loved, who I'd shared my life with, who I'd believed was my partner through thick and thin. She wasn't just a participant, she was a weapon, a perfectly crafted tool designed to inflict maximum damage. She was the key that unlocked the door to my deepest vulnerabilities. There was no closure. Not the kind you read about in books or see in movies. Just the cold, hard, undeniable truth. I never got my brother back. Maybe I never truly had him. And I certainly never had the wife I thought I did. I just had people who were close enough, who knew me well enough to see exactly where to stab. And they both aimed perfectly. Still, I kept the photos. Not to dwell on the pain, not to relive the humiliation, but as a reminder. A stark visual reminder of what survival looked like, of how I had been so utterly broken and yet I was still here, still standing, and that in itself was a victory. The silence in my new apartment was a stark contrast to the chaos of my past. It was a clean, sterile silence, devoid of the echoes of arguments or the heavy weight of unspoken truths. I sat by the window, watching the city lights blink on, each one a distant, indifferent star. The envelope with the photos lay on the coffee table, a constant reminder of the calculated malice that had defined the end of my marriage and my relationship with my brother. I'd spent weeks obsessing over those photos, replaying every memory, dissecting every interaction. Had he always seen me that way? As a target, a mark. The man who had pulled me from the brink of suicide, the man I'd idolized, had been nurturing this destructive plan all along. It was a betrayal of a magnitude I still struggled to grasp. He hadn't just slept with my wife. He had systematically disassembled my life, using my vulnerabilities as his blueprint. Emily's attempts to reach me had long since ceased. The brief flicker of her healing message had been extinguished by my response. I imagined her now, trying to build a new life, perhaps with Josh, perhaps alone. The thought brought no satisfaction, only a weary resignation. Her betrayal had been a violent storm, but now the landscape was just empty. The vibrant colors of our life together had been washed away, leaving behind a muted, monochromatic existence. I picked up one of the photos. It was me beaming, my arms slung around Josh's shoulders. He was smiling too, but his eyes, looking back now, there was a glint in them, a predatory awareness that had been there all along. He knew. He knew he held the power to obliterate me, and he'd meticulously orchestrated his rise to power by dismantling me from within. It was a chilling realization, a confirmation that the people closest to us could be the most dangerous. A small, unexpected feeling stirred within me. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was more like a quiet curiosity. What would life look like now, free from the constant pressure of their deception, free from the burden of their lies? It was an uncharted territory, daunting but also, strangely, liberating. I was no longer defined by their actions, by their betrayal. I was simply me, navigating a world that felt both familiar and utterly alien. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was genuinely mine to walk. The quiet started to feel less like an absence and more like a space. A space to breathe, to think, to simply exist without the constant hum of anxiety that had become my background noise. I'd been so accustomed to the emotional turmoil, the adrenaline rush of discovery and confrontation, that the absence of it felt almost jarring. My therapist, Dr. Ramirez, had told me this would happen, that the fight and flight response, once engaged, would eventually subside, leaving a void. She called it processing. I called it eerie. I'd started small. Daily walks in the park, noticing the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, the chirping of birds I'd never paid attention to before. I'd rejoined my old gaming community, the one I'd abandoned when Emily had started pulling me further into her world. It felt strange, reconnecting with people who knew nothing of the storm that had raged through my life. They asked about Emily, and I gave the briefest, most diplomatic answers I could muster. "We're no longer together." The words felt heavy, final, but also strangely neutral. One evening, while sorting through boxes of old college memorabilia, I found a stack of letters. They were from my parents, written during my first year away at university, full of encouragement and silly anecdotes. I remembered their unwavering support, a constant thread that had run through my life, even when I felt adrift. It was a stark contrast to the conditional love and calculated manipulation I'd recently experienced. That night, I called my mom, not to rehash the painful details, not to seek more understanding of her past knowledge, but just to talk. We spoke for hours about nothing and everything. She told me about her garden, about a funny story involving my dad and a runaway dog. It was simple, normal, and it was exactly what I needed. The fractured relationships, the broken bonds, those were the deepest wounds, the ones that would take the longest to heal. The starkest reminder of Josh's betrayal remained the photos. I hadn't thrown them away, not yet. I kept them in a small wooden box, tucked away in the back of my closet. They were a physical manifestation of the darkness, a tangible reminder of his capacity for cruelty, but I'd started to look at them differently. Not with the raw pain of discovery, but with a detached curiosity. It was like examining a specimen under a microscope, a study of human nature at its most depraved. I knew I'd have to confront them again, perhaps even destroy them, but for now, they served a purpose, a memento mori for the brother I thought I knew. The finality of it all settled in like a persistent, low-grade ache. There were no grand epiphanies, no dramatic pronouncements of victory, just a quiet acceptance of what was and what would never be again. My old house was sold. The furniture, the remnants of a shared life, were either dispersed or stored away. I'd kept only a few essential items, a minimalist approach to a life stripped bare. I'd managed to track down Emily's lawyer's contact information, not to engage in further legal battles, but to sign off on the final divorce decree. The documents were sent electronically, a sterile, impersonal process that mirrored the end of our relationship. I signed them without hesitation, a sense of finality washing over me. There were no hard feelings left, only a vast, empty space where those feelings used to reside. The strange peace I'd been experiencing began to solidify. It wasn't the bliss of happiness, but the quiet relief of having weathered a terrible storm and emerged battered but intact. Dr. Ramirez had said that sometimes survival itself became its own reward, and I could feel the truth of that statement resonating deep within me. I thought about Josh again, not with anger but with a profound sense of loss. The brother who had saved my life was also the man who had tried to destroy it. The duality was a Gordian knot I would likely never untangle. I wondered if he ever felt any remorse, any flicker of guilt as he navigated the ruins he'd helped create. The lack of response from his ex-wife's brief thank you message suggested his life hadn't improved. I'd heard he'd moved out of state, a ghost of a man seeking to outrun his past. One sunny afternoon, I found myself walking past the park where I'd taken my first tentative steps back into the world. I saw a couple, laughing, holding hands, their faces alight with the simple joy of being together. A pang, sharp and familiar, shot through me. It was a fleeting glimpse of what had been lost, of what might have been. But instead of falling into despair, I felt a quiet gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the resilience discovered, for the slow, arduous process of rebuilding myself. I was alone, yes, but I was no longer defined by their betrayal. I was free from the suffocating grip of their deception. The future was an open expanse, an unwritten chapter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. This was not the end. It was a new beginning, forged in the crucible of unimaginable pain, but a beginning nonetheless. Now, real quick before we move to Chapter 2, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories just like this. Now let's get started.